Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the stars. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones like a cold wind that would not stop blowing. For 3 months now, his crew had been getting the same bad news from across the galaxy. One by one, the great space nations were going quiet, and no one could say why. The ship was called the USS Defiance, and it was one of the best ships in the human fleet. Jake had been its captain for 5 years, and he knew every sound it made and every light on every control panel. Today, all those lights seemed dimmer somehow, as if they too could sense the danger that was coming. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Carter walked up to him with a datapad in her hands. Her red hair was pulled back tight and her green eyes looked worried. She had been with Jake for 3 years, and he trusted her more than anyone else on the ship. When Lisa looked worried, it meant something really bad was happening. "Sir, we just lost contact with another 20 star systems," she said in a quiet voice. "Whatever is doing this is moving faster now. The pattern shows it heading straight for Earth and all the human colonies." Jake took the datapad and looked at the numbers. Each red mark on the star map meant an entire civilization that had simply stopped talking. Some of these were races that humans had been friends with for decades. Others were so old and powerful that no one thought anything could hurt them. The Altarian Republic had been the first to go quiet 6 weeks ago. They were masters of energy and could build weapons that turned starlight into pure power. The humans had bought their technology and learned much from them. Now there was nothing but empty space where their worlds used to send signals. Next had been the Kepler group, which was 12 worlds that worked together in peace. They had the best communication systems in the galaxy and could talk to anyone anywhere at any time. Their silence was the most frightening thing of all, because if they could not call for help, then whatever took them was beyond anything anyone had ever seen. Even the ancient vegan empire had vanished without a trace. These were beings so old that they had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves on Earth. Their technology was like magic to most races, and their ships could do things that seemed impossible. If something could destroy them, then nothing in the galaxy was safe. Dr. Amanda Phillips looked up from her science station where she had been studying the data for hours. She was the smartest person Jake knew, and if anyone could figure out what was happening, it would be her. Amanda had spent most of her life studying alien races and their cultures. She knew more about the galaxy than almost any human alive. "Captain, I have been looking at the pattern of attacks," she said. "Whatever this thing is, it moves in a spiral, working its way toward the center of the galaxy. Based on the speed and direction, Earth will be in its path in about 2 weeks." The bridge became very quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. Jake felt his stomach drop as he realized that humanity might be about to face the same fate as all the other races that had gone silent. Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez suddenly sat up straight at his communication post. His face had gone white and his hands were shaking as he adjusted the controls. Ben was usually calm and steady, but now he looked like he had seen a ghost. "Captain, we are getting a message on the emergency channel," he said. "It is coming from the Centauri system." Jake felt his blood turn cold. The Centaurians were humanity's closest friends in space. They were warriors who had never lost a major battle in all their history. Their ships were fast and deadly, and their soldiers were the best fighters in 3-star sectors. If the Centaurians were calling for help, then the situation was worse than anyone had imagined. "Put it on the main screen," Jake ordered. The screen flickered and showed the face of General Vax, who commanded all Centaurian forces. His blue skin was covered with cuts and his uniform was torn and bloody. Behind him, Jake could see smoke and fires and the sound of explosions in the distance. "Human ships, this is General Vax calling anyone who can hear this message," the alien warrior said in a voice full of pain. "Centauri Prime is under attack by something we have never seen before. Our entire defense fleet has been destroyed in less than 1 day. These things do not talk and do not want to make deals. They just eat everything they touch. Our planets and our people and even our stars are being consumed by them." The general's image shook as another explosion went off somewhere behind him. "We estimate that our world has maybe 30 hours left before everything is gone. I am telling all races in the galaxy to run as far and as fast as they can. This enemy cannot be reasoned with and cannot be stopped. We are the strongest military force in this part of space, and we lasted less than a day against them. Save yourselves while you still can." The message ended and the screen went dark. Jake stared at the empty screen, trying to understand what he had just seen. The Centaurians had the most powerful army in the galaxy. and they had been crushed in a single day. Whatever was coming for humanity was beyond anything that had ever existed before. "Sir, I am detecting strange readings from the Centauri system," Ben said. "The energy patterns are impossible. It looks like something is actually eating space itself." Dr. Phillips looked up from her instruments with fear in her eyes. "Jake, I have been studying the energy signatures from all the dead systems. This force is not just destroying civilizations, it is harvesting them, converting everything into pure energy and storing it somehow. Based on the pattern, it will reach our outer colonies in exactly 14 days. Jake closed his eyes and tried to think. When he opened them again, there was steel in his gaze. He was the captain of this ship, and these people were counting on him to keep them safe. More than that, he was a human being and his entire species was in danger. "Set course for Earth maximum speed," he ordered. "Send priority messages to all human worlds and the Defense Command. Tell them condition black and all hands to battle stations. Tell them that humanity stands alone now." As the USS Defiance turned toward home, none of them knew that this dark moment would be the beginning of something amazing. The stars had trembled with fear, but they were about to hear something that would echo through space forever. They were about to hear humanity's battle cry. 2 weeks later, Admiral Susan Wright stood deep underground in the war room beneath Luna Base. Around her were displays that showed the enemy coming closer with each passing hour. She was 55 years old and had been commanding the human space navy for 10 years, but nothing had prepared her for this day. The thing that was destroying the galaxy had eaten 47 more star systems since the Centaurians had sent their last message. The long-range sensors showed a massive hole in space about 3 light-years across, and it was growing bigger as it moved toward human territory. Every world it touched simply disappeared as if it had never existed at all. Colonel Frank Murphy was the head of Human Special Forces and one of the toughest soldiers alive. He stood next to a tactical display that showed their defensive positions. Even he looked worried as he pointed to the evacuation routes they had planned for the civilian population. "Admiral, we have moved everyone from the outer colonies, but the people are scared," he said. "Some of the transport ships are breaking away from the main group and heading for deep space. They think they have a better chance on their own." Wright nodded sadly. "Let them go, Frank. Right now, survival matters more than following orders." She turned to look at all the commanders who had gathered for this meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen, I will not lie to you. Every computer simulation we have run ends with the complete destruction of humanity. We have about 68 hours before this thing reaches our solar system." Dr. Helen Zhang had been working around the clock trying to understand what they were fighting. She was Earth's top expert on alien technology, and if anyone could find a weakness, it would be her. Helen had been studying the energy patterns left behind after each attack, hoping to learn something useful about their enemy. "Admiral, I have been analyzing what is left after this entity attacks," she said. "It is not just destroying matter, it is converting everything into exotic energy and storing it inside itself. The mass and energy of entire star systems are being compressed and held within the creature." "Do we know what it wants?" Wright asked. "Power," Helen replied simply. "It is collecting the energy of whole civilizations and their stars. I think it is building up to something big. Maybe some kind of transformation or evolution to a higher form of existence." Captain Roy Fisher commanded humanity's newest and most powerful warship, the USS Vengeance. He was a fighter who believed that any problem could be solved with enough firepower. Roy shook his head as he listened to the scientific discussion. "With respect, Doctor, it does not matter what this thing wants," he said. "All that matters is that we find a way to stop it before it gets to Earth." Wright looked at the displays showing all of humanity's military forces. 327 ships, from tiny fighters to massive battleships. It was the largest fleet humans had ever put together, but compared to something that had casually destroyed civilizations. With millions of years of experience, it seemed pitifully small. "Admiral, we have received some scattered messages from refugee ships throughout the galaxy," said Commander Diana Foster, who was in charge of intelligence gathering. "It seems we are not the only ones trying to fight back. The Andromedans are gathering their fleet at a place called the Spiral Nexus, and there are reports of other races trying to organize resistance." Wright felt a tiny spark of hope. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Unknown, ma'am. Communications are very difficult right now, but it could be a significant force. The problem is coordination. We do not have time to plan a proper joint operation with alien allies. Admiral Wright walked over to the main display that showed the approaching darkness consuming everything in its path. Behind her, the greatest military minds of humanity waited to hear what she would decide, the weight of her entire species' future pressed down on her shoulders like a mountain. "There is something else I want to mention," Dr. Zhang said quietly. "I have been studying human military history and comparing it to how other alien races fight wars. Every other civilization we know follows predictable patterns in combat. They use standard tactics and logical strategic thinking." "What about humans?" Wright asked. Zhang smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Humans are crazy, Admiral. Every major victory in our history came from doing something that should have been impossible. We do not follow the normal rules because we do not know what the normal rules are. We adapt and improvise and refuse to give up even when mathematics says we should lose." Colonel Murphy grinned at that. "The doctor has a good point. We have never been the strongest or smartest species in the galaxy, but we have something else that makes us different." "What is that, Frank?" "We are too stupid to know when we are beaten." Wright felt something change in the room. The despair that had been hanging over them like a dark cloud began to shift into something else. Not confidence because they were not that foolish, but determination. Pure stubborn human determination that had carried their species from cave dwellers to star travelers in just a few thousand years. "All right," Wright said as she turned to face her commanders. "We are going to do what humans do best. We are going to try something so insane and impossible that even a cosmic-level threat will not see it coming." She gestured to the tactical display showing the enemy's approach. "We are not going to run away, and we are not going to hide in some distant corner of space. We are going to charge straight into the heart of that thing and remind the universe that humanity does not go quietly." Captain Fisher leaned forward with interest. "What is the plan, Admiral?" Wright's eyes gleamed with the same fierce light that had driven humanity from a single world to the stars. It was the look of someone who refused to accept defeat, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. "We are going to teach this cosmic bully why throughout all of human history the most dangerous words in any language have always been hold my beer and watch this," she said. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed what she had said. Then slowly smiles began to appear on faces around the room. They were still probably going to die, but at least they would die doing something memorable. Dr. Zhang pulled up new data on her display screen. "I have an idea, Admiral, but you are going to think it is completely insane." Wright laughed for the first time in weeks. "Helen, at this point, insane is exactly what we need. Tell me what you have in mind." Dr. Helen Zhang stood in front of all the fleet commanders. In the main briefing room of Luna Base, her presentation showed complex equations and theoretical physics that made even the smartest military officers scratch their heads in confusion. But Helen had found something important, and everyone could see the excitement in her eyes. "The entity works by consuming matter and turning it into exotic energy," she explained as she pointed to the floating displays above the conference table. "But there is a fundamental problem with how it operates. It is too efficient." Admiral Wright raised an eyebrow. "Explain what you mean by that, Doctor." "Every physical system in the universe has waste and energy losses. It is one of the basic laws of physics that you cannot convert matter to energy with perfect efficiency. But this entity seems to violate that law completely. It converts everything with 100% efficiency, which should be impossible." Helen highlighted specific readings on her display. "Unless it is not from our universe at all." "Are you saying this thing comes from somewhere else?" Captain Fisher asked. "Exactly. The energy signatures suggest it operates under completely different physical laws, which means it might not be prepared to deal with our kind of physics and our kind of technology." Colonel Murphy scratched his chin thoughtfully. "So you are telling us we can hurt it because we use the wrong kind of weapons?" Helen nodded with growing excitement. "Yes. It has adapted to consume civilizations that follow predictable physical laws and use standard technology. But human science has always been irregular. We build things that should not work according to normal physics, but they work anyway because we force them to work through pure stubbornness." Captain Lisa Santos commanded the USS Ranger, which was humanity's most advanced science vessel. She leaned forward with interest. "What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Zhang?" "A resonance cascade failure. We deliberately destabilize our own reactor cores in a very specific pattern, creating a feedback loop that should be theoretically impossible. If I am right, the entity will not be able to absorb the energy because it violates the physical laws it is designed to work with." The room fell completely silent. Every commander understood exactly what Zhang was suggesting, and the implications were terrifying. You want us to deliberately cause catastrophic reactor failures across our entire fleet? Wright said slowly. Not just failures, Admiral. Specifically tuned failures that create a harmonized energy pulse across all ships simultaneously. Think of it as screaming at the entity in a frequency it cannot understand or process. Commander Pete Jackson was the fleet's chief engineer and one of the smartest technical minds in the human military. He ran quick calculations on his tablet and looked up with concern. The power requirements would be enormous. We would need to channel the total energy output of our entire fleet into a single synchronized pulse. And if Dr. Zhang is wrong about the entity's vulnerabilities, then we all die anyway. Wright finished the thought. But at least we die trying something that has never been attempted in the history of galactic warfare. Captain Fisher nodded with approval. I like it. It is completely insane, has almost no chance of success, and will probably kill us all. He grinned widely. It is the most human plan I have ever heard in my life. Dr. Zhang continued her briefing with more confidence, now that she saw the commanders were willing to listen. There is more to this plan. I have been studying the entity's movement patterns, and I think I know exactly where it is going. The galactic core, specifically the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. Why would it go there? Wright asked. Because that is where the most concentrated energy in the galaxy exists. If it can consume Sagittarius, a star, the central black hole, it would have enough power to potentially remake reality itself according to its own rules. Every calculation I have run suggests that is its ultimate goal. Commander Diana Foster spoke up from the intelligence section. That gives us one significant advantage, Admiral. We know where it is going, which means we can get there first and choose our own battlefield. Wright studied the star charts showing the dangerous route to the galactic core. It would mean traveling through some of the most hazardous space in the known universe. Stellar nurseries where new stars were being born. Neutron star clusters that could crush ships with gravity. Alone in gravitational anomalies that had destroyed countless vessels over the centuries. How long to reach the galactic core? She asked the navigation specialists. 70. 2 hours at maximum warp speed, assuming our ships can handle the gravitational stress of that region, replied the chief navigator. Wright looked around the room at the faces of humanity's finest military leaders. She saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. The same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried humanity from a single planet to the stars in just a few generations. All right, people, here is what we are going to do, she announced. The fleet will divide into 3 operational groups. Group Alpha, led by Captain Fisher, will take position at the galactic core and begin preparations for Dr. Zhang's resonance cascade. Group Beta, under Captain Santos, will establish a defensive perimeter and try to coordinate with any alien resistance forces we can locate. Group Charlie, under Colonel Murphy, will serve as our mobile reserve and evacuation force for any survivors. She paused and looked directly at each commander in turn. I want to be absolutely clear about something. This is not intended as a suicide mission, but the mathematical odds of survival are essentially 0. Anyone who wants to volunteer for evacuation duty instead of direct combat operations can do so without any shame or loss of honor. Not a single hand moved in the room. Wright felt a surge of fierce pride in her species wash over her. Very well then, we launch in 6 hours. Send word to all human colonies that if we fail, they are to scatter to the farthest reaches of space. And remember what we tried to do here. If we succeed, she smiled grimly. If we succeed, the galaxy will know that humanity refuses to go quietly into the darkness. Captain Fisher raised his coffee cup in an informal salute. To quote an old human saying, Admiral, if you are going to do something stupid, at least do it with style. The assembled commanders raised their own cups and coffee mugs. To humanity, they said together in one voice. As the meeting broke up and the commanders hurried to their ships to prepare for departure, Admiral Wright remained behind, staring at the tactical displays. In 72 hours, humanity would either save the galaxy or die in the attempt. Either way, the universe would never forget what happened next. The stars themselves would remember the day that a young species from a small blue planet decided that some things were worth fighting for, no matter how impossible the odds seemed to be. 71 hours later, the human fleet came out of hyperspace at the edge of the galactic core, where ancient stars burned with violent beauty around the massive black hole called Sagittarius A star. The sight that greeted them was beyond anything they could have imagined in their worst nightmares. "Holy Mother of God," Captain Fisher whispered as he stared at the main display of the USS Vengeance. The entity had arrived before them. What they saw was not a ship or even a fleet of ships. It was a living wound in the fabric of space itself. The darkness stretched across dozens of light years and was studded with the twisted remains of entire star systems that it had consumed. Within its depths, Admiral Wright could see the corrupted remnants of great civilizations. Centaurian battlecruisers, Altarian, energy lattices, and even fragments of the ancient vegan empire, all absorbed and transformed into something horrible and unrecognizable. But humanity was not alone in this final battle. "Admiral, I am receiving signals from multiple alien vessels, reported communications. Officer Lieutenant Amy Brooks from the command." Ship USS Defiant. "It looks like everyone who could make it showed up for this fight." The tactical display suddenly lit up with hundreds of friendly markers. Ships from dozens of civilizations that humanity had never even met were taking defensive positions around the galactic core. Sleek Andromedan vessels, crystalline Silurian warships, massive Draconian battle stations, and countless others. These were the survivors of 100 worlds making their final stand against the darkness. "Open a channel to all vessels," Wright commanded. The communication system crackled to life, and suddenly the bridge was filled with dozens of alien voices speaking in languages that ranged from harmonious crystal chimes to subsonic growls that could barely be heard. "This is Admiral Susan Wright of the Terran Defense Force," she announced to the gathered fleet. "To all vessels, we are deeply honored to stand with you in this final battle against our common enemy." A familiar voice cut through the chatter of alien languages. "Admiral Wright, this is Captain Zara of the Andromedan First Fleet. We have been monitoring your approach through hyperspace. Your species' battle plan is ambitious, to say the least." Wright smiled grimly despite the impossible odds they were facing. "That is one way to put it, Captain. Are your vessels prepared to coordinate with our resonance cascade plan?" "Our ships are ready, Admiral, as are the Silurians, the Draconians, and 17 other species represented here today. We may come from different worlds and different cultures, but today we fight as one united force." Dr. Zhang's voice came through the ship's intercom system with urgent news. "Admiral, I am reading massive energy spikes from the entity. It has begun to feed on Sagittarius, a star itself. If it completes this process and consumes the galactic core." "How much time do we have, Helen? Maybe 30 minutes before it reaches critical mass and becomes unstoppable." Wright opened fleet-wide communications to address all the ships gathered for this desperate battle. "All vessels, this is Admiral Wright. Begin cascade preparation immediately. All civilian and support ships fall back to minimum safe distance. Combat vessels take positions according to the battle plan we transmitted. Across the vast battle space, hundreds of warships from dozens of different species moved into their assigned positions. It was a sight that should have been impossible under normal circumstances. Natural enemies working together, ancient rivals fighting side by side, all united by the simple desire to continue existing in a universe that still had room for life and hope. Captain Fisher's voice crackled through the communication system. "Admiral, the Vengeance is in position and reactor modifications are complete. We are ready to light this candle, as the old saying goes." "USS Ranger reporting ready for cascade initiation," added Captain Santos. "The science team has synchronized our cascade frequency with all the allied vessels. This is either going to be the most beautiful explosion in galactic history or the most expensive failure anyone has ever attempted." Colonel Murphy's voice joined the chorus of readiness reports. "Special Forces teams are standing by, Admiral. If this thing somehow survives the cascade, we are prepared for direct boarding operations." Wright almost smiled at that suggestion. Leave it to Murphy to propose boarding a cosmic entity that had consumed half the galaxy. That was exactly the kind of thinking that made humans so dangerous when they were cornered. "All vessels report ready for cascade initiation, Admiral," Brooks announced from her communication station. Wright looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. Young and old veterans and rookies, all united by the simple fact that they were human beings who refused to accept defeat even when faced with impossible odds. Behind them, through the viewports, she could see the lights of hundreds of allied vessels stretching as far as the eye could see. "Dr. Zhang," she said quietly, so that only her immediate crew could hear, "are you absolutely certain this plan will work?" Zhang's voice was steady despite the impossibility of what they were about to attempt. Admiral, I have no idea if this will work or if we will all be dead in the next few minutes. But I know that no one has ever tried anything like this before in the history of the universe. And if there is one thing I have learned about humanity, it is that we have a special talent for making impossible things happen through pure determination. The entity began to pulse with dark energy as it fed on the supermassive black hole at the galaxy's heart. Space itself seemed to bend and twist around it as reality struggled to contain something that was never meant to exist in normal dimensions. All vessels, Wright announced to the combined fleet. This is it. On my mark, initiate cascade sequence according to plan. Remember, we are not just fighting for our own species today. We are fighting for the right of life itself to exist in this universe. She took a deep breath and felt the weight of every living being in the galaxy resting on her shoulders. In a few moments, they would either save everything or die in the most spectacular failure in cosmic history. This is Admiral Susan Wright of Earth, representing the human species and all our new allies. We have a message for the entity that is consuming our galaxy. Her voice carried across space to every ship in the Allied fleet. You picked the wrong neighborhood. Her finger moved toward the activation control that would begin humanity's last desperate gamble. All vessels prepare for cascade initiation on my mark. The entity seemed to pause in its feeding as if it sensed that something was about to happen. Mark. The resonance cascade began like a whisper. A barely noticeable harmonic frequency started from humanity's flagship and spread outward through the Allied fleet like ripples moving across a cosmic pond. Within seconds, hundreds of vessels from dozens of different civilizations synchronized, their reactor cores in perfect harmony, creating something that had never existed before in the history of the universe. Dr. Zhang watched her instruments with growing amazement and terror. It is working, Admiral. The cascade is achieving perfect resonance across all ship classes and power systems. The energy output is completely off our measurement scales. The entity noticed something was happening. For the first time since it had begun its cosmic feast of destruction, the darkness paused in its feeding. Massive tendrils of absorbed matter and energy writhed and twisted as it turned its attention toward the gathered fleet. When it finally spoke, its voice echoed through space itself, bypassing normal hearing and striking directly at the souls of every living being within range. Insignificant creatures' consumption is inevitable. Resistance is futile. Admiral Wright keyed her communications array to broadcast on all frequencies throughout local space. You know what, Cosmic Ugly? Every tyrant and bully in human history has said exactly the same thing. Do you want to know how that worked out for all of them? The cascade intensity doubled and then tripled in strength. Ships designed by completely different civilizations operating under wildly varying physical laws and technological principles somehow found perfect harmony with each other. The impossible had suddenly become inevitable through sheer human stubbornness. Captain Fisher's voice crackled through the communication system from the USS Vengeance. Admiral, hull integrity is down to 60% and falling fast. Whatever we are doing, it is tearing our ships apart from the inside out. Andromedan. First Fleet reporting critical cascade stress levels added. Captain Zara. We can maintain resonance for perhaps 2 more minutes before structural failure. Hold the line, everyone, Wright commanded. Dr. Zhang, what is happening to the entity? Zhang's voice was filled with scientific wonder and primal terror in equal measure. It is rejecting the energy, Admiral. The cascade is creating a feedback loop that its absorption matrix cannot process or understand. But the power requirements are exceeding all our projections. If we do not achieve cascade critical in the next 90 seconds, we will lose structural integrity across the entire Allied fleet. The entity began to convulse and writhe in apparent agony. For the first time in countless eons, it was experiencing something it could not consume, could not understand, and could not control. Massive sections of absorbed matter began to break free from its central mass. Entire star systems that had been consumed and digested were suddenly being ejected back into normal space. Look at that incredible sight, shouted Lieutenant Brooks. It is regurgitating everything it ate. The Centauri system, the Altarian Republic, all of them are coming back. But the cost of maintaining the cascade was enormous. Across the Allied fleet, ships began to buckle and crack under the incredible stress. The USS Ranger's hull developed fractures along its entire length before emergency force fields sealed the breaches. Andromedan crystal ships shattered completely and then reformed themselves. Draconian battle stations vented atmosphere into space as their massive hulls flexed far beyond their design limits. Colonel Murphy's voice cut through the chaos of damage reports and system failures. Admiral, permission to take a special forces team aboard that thing while it is distracted. If we can plant nuclear charges at its core structure. Absolutely. Not Frank, you would never survive the approach through all that distorted space. With all due respect, ma'am, survival was never part of the job description when I signed up for this. Wright was about to respond when Dr. Zhang's voice rose to nearly a shout. Admiral, the entity's absorption matrix is collapsing completely. But there is something else happening. It is trying to escape into higher dimensional space. Through the viewports, they could see the massive entity beginning to phase in and out of normal reality. Its enormous form was becoming translucent and ghost-like, as it attempted to flee to dimensions where the laws of physics might protect it from humanity's impossible cascade. Attack! All vessels maximum cascade power now, Wright ordered. Do not let that thing escape to hurt someone else. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every ship in the Allied fleet pushed their reactors beyond all safety limits and design specifications. The harmonized energy pulse became a roar that could be felt through the fundamental fabric of space itself. Reality bent and twisted around the cascade focal point as forces beyond comprehension clashed in the galactic core. And then in a moment that was impossible even by the incredible standards of this day, something truly miraculous happened. The entity screamed, not through radio waves or telepathic projection, but through the fundamental forces that held the universe together. Stars flickered and dimmed across the entire galaxy as its cry of pain and complete bewilderment echoed through the structure of spacetime itself. It burns. How do you burn that which cannot be burned? What manner of creatures are you? Admiral Wright smiled with fierce satisfaction as she realized their insane plan was actually working. We are human, you cosmic waste of perfectly good space. We specialize in doing things that cannot be done. The cascade reached critical resonance at exactly the right moment. For one perfect instant, hundreds of ships from dozens of species became a single instrument, playing a song of defiance that could be heard across the galaxy. The entity, faced with energy it could not absorb and physics it could not understand, made the only choice available to it. It ran away. The massive darkness collapsed in on itself, abandoning all the consumed matter and energy it had spent eons collecting. Star systems tumbled free from its grasp, returning to normal space in brilliant explosions of light and renewed life. The entity's form compressed smaller and smaller until it finally tore a hole in reality itself and escaped into dimensions far beyond human comprehension. For a long moment, the Allied fleet drifted in stunned silence. Then Captain Fisher's voice cut through the quiet. Did we just scare off a cosmic-level entity by being too weird for it to understand? Dr. Zhang was laughing and crying at the same time as she read her instruments. All energy readings are returning to normal across all sectors. The entity is completely gone and it took nothing with it. Everything it consumed has been restored to normal space. Wright opened a fleet-wide channel to address all the Allied ships. All vessels, this is Admiral Wright. Stand down from Cascade operations. Mission accomplished. The cheers that echoed through the communication array came in dozens of different languages from hundreds of ships. But underneath all the alien voices, Wright could clearly hear the distinctly human whoops and hollers of her own crews celebrating their impossible victory. Captain Zara's voice came through the noise. Admiral Wright, the Andromedan Republic would like to formally request a technological and cultural exchange program with humanity. Any species capable of weaponizing pure stubbornness clearly has much to teach the rest of the galaxy. Wright grinned widely. Request approved, Captain. But I should warn you that spending time around humans tends to make other species a little crazy too, after what we just witnessed, Admiral. I believe that might be exactly what the galaxy needs right now. As the Allied fleet began rescue and recovery operations for all the restored civilizations, Admiral Wright stood on her bridge and looked out at the stars. They no longer trembled with fear. Instead, they seemed to shine brighter, as if the Yudane universe itself was celebrating this victory of life over death. The darkness had heard humanity's battle cry and found it too strange, too impossible, and too stubbornly defiant to consume. Word of this battle would spread across the galaxy within days, carrying a simple message. If you ever find yourself facing impossible odds against an unstoppable enemy, call the humans. They specialize in making the impossible happen. And somewhere in the depths of space transmitted on frequencies that would reach every corner of the galaxy, a new phrase entered the universal vocabulary. When faced with overwhelming odds, when victory seemed mathematically impossible, when the very laws of physics suggested defeat, beings across the cosmos would remember the humans and whisper those magic words. Hold my beer and watch this. The stars no longer trembled. They had heard humanity's battle cry and they would never forget it.